Hey, good afternoon to you. 306 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, we'll talk to Ken Cuccinelli about America's immigration crisis, America's invasion, and the effort by the Biden administration to make it easier for illegals to flow across that border. Tammy Nobles is here at 4:30. You may know her as the mother of a victim of a murderous illegal immigrant that happened in Maryland. We'll talk to Tammy Nobles about that coming up. She just testified before Congress, got horrific treatment from the Democrats there. Michael Ding is with us at 5 o'clock. He's a counsel for America First Legal. We talked to him about a new lawsuit they have against the Department of Homeland Security. Everybody's suing DHS these days. And John Daniel Davidson is here at 5:30 from the Federalist. We talk about Nikki Haley's failing campaign, which relies on Democrats. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes. The New Hampshire primary today. All very exciting. Donald Trump set to win it in a landslide. And then the primary phase moves on. We'll talk about that at some length today. But I do want to focus on the border for a minute. You know, the United States Supreme Court yesterday, in vacating the injunction imposed by the Fifth Circuit, essentially, in reality, allowed the following. Allowed Biden to keep on destroying Texas state property and to have illegals flow across the border. That's the effect of it. And talking with friends and family about this last night, because it all broke while we were on the show yesterday, the Supreme Court decision here. And there was no opinion rendered. The court didn't write an opinion. It's a very short stub of a statement. It's just of the injunction's been vacated with 4 justices in dissent. They don't even name the justices in the majority, but they do name the dissenting justices. And it may not come as a surprise to you. Guess who they are? Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh. Those are the 4. Now, if I were to tell you nothing else about the case, and I only told you that, well, there were 4 justices who dissented in this, and they were those guys, and then everybody else was in the majority, to include Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sonia Sotomayor. If I told you nothing else about the case, who the plaintiff was, what states it involved, what constitutional question it involved, if I just gave you that list, what would you conclude about the case? What would you conclude? You know what the answer is. The answer is that, well, I would side with the normal people, the sane people. Clarence Thomas. I would side with Sam Alito. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, not a chance. Because whatever this case is about, they're on the side of tyranny. That's what you would conclude, knowing nothing else about it. And you'd be right. You'd be totally right. So, in talking to friends and family yesterday after this all went down, you know, you always hold out hope that there's some underlying principle when things don't go your way in the court and you're like, oh, man, this is bad for the country. Maybe there's some underlying principle that they're standing up for that I would agree with. Well, A, they didn't release an opinion to support the decision yesterday. There was no writing to that effect. They didn't, think to tell the American public why they were opening the border up. Don't bother. Too much work. There's that. But the other piece is again, look who's in the dissent. That should tell you everything. It tells me everything. So this is crazy. And I don't know, we had some calls yesterday, and the number, as always, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL, saying somebody's got to do something. I saw, Tucker Carlson yesterday reacting to this on Twitter, on X, asking, where are the men in Texas? Where are the men? He asks. He said, so it's unanimous. Everyone in power, from the White House to the hedge fund managers to the Supreme Court of the United States, has decided to destroy the country by allowing it to be invaded. That leaves the population to defend itself. Where are the men of Texas, he asks. Why aren't they protecting their state and the nation? I know this is a big constitutional test, but Greg Abbott should arrest a Border Patrol agent. Greg Abbott should catch a Border Patrol agent in the act of destroying Texas state property, place the silver bracelets on him, and take him into custody. In fact, I bet you could find a Border Patrol agent who would do it. Somebody who wants to be cuffed as an expression of the fact that they want to see this border secured to help this along. And then it becomes a big fight in the courts. Now, you might look back, the Supreme Court ruled a long time ago on this subject, sort of. It was the Nagel decision in 1890, which dictated that U.S. officers held in custody by state authorities for doing acts which they were authorized or required to do by the Constitution and laws of the United States are entitled to be released from such imprisonment. And the writ of habeas corpus is the appropriate remedy for that purpose. So that, theoretically, that's the one you would look at. Well, that's the precedent here. You can't have state officers arresting federal officers so long as they're doing their jobs as required by the Constitution. But that's the rub, isn't it? The Constitution. Because the Constitution dictates that the federal government has an obligation to thwart invasion for the states. And guess who's failing here? Well, those are the feds. The feds are failing. They're explicitly violating the Constitution. The Biden administration is there a more obvious act than destroying a border barrier to allow more people in? I don't think you could get any more obvious than that. They're trafficking them into the country. They're destroying the barriers. And the Border Patrol is not serving in any way to actually stop people from getting in. And the Border Patrol supports Texas. The Border Patrol Union does. They keep releasing statements that they're on Texas's side. And that what their own administration, what the people they work for, what they're doing is a gross violation of our nation's sovereignty. And they're totally right about that. Now, today, this, of course, all comes up at the White House. I say, of course, because of people like Peter Doocy. That's why it comes up at the White House. And so it begins, as usual, with the adult press briefing today. John Kirby going first. And Peter Doocy asks, I think, really the core question. Why are you making it easier for people to invade us?
Does razor wire work?
Does razor wire work for what? Does it work for the Border Patrol to allow them to have the access they need to be able to better process people that are trying to get across the border? I don't think so, and that's why we asked for it to be removed.
Does razor wire work? Does it work? And do you hear what Kirby says? We need to get more people into the country. So the razor wire is impeding our ability to aid the invasion. To aid the invasion. That's what happened today. That's how Kirby answered that question. Now, additionally, do we have this audio of why are they making it easier for people to illegally invade? Corey? He's adding it right now. Okay, good. So one of the questions today from Doocy was, straight up, why are you making it easier? Why is it that that's your priority? That Americans who want to invade can just pour right into the country? And Kirby is flabbergasted. Kirby doesn't even really know how to answer that particular question. At first, he's like, what do you mean we're making it easier for people to pour into the country? He's like, no, it's really straightforward. You're cutting open the border barrier. So, therefore, you are making it monumentally easier to pour into the United States. It's in there now? Okay, good. Here we go. Here's John Kirby, Peter Doocy.
Why are you guys making it easier for people to enter the country illegally?
I don't believe we are. Why do you think we are?
Well, you guys sued to cut razor wire that was put in place by Texas officials.
So that the Border Patrol could actually do their jobs. But keep going.
Well,
let me pause on that for a moment just to give a point of clarification. Doocy is right that the Justice Department, that the Biden administration has sued Texas, but it's because of their state law, which involves trying to police illegal immigration, SB 4. But in this particular case, it's actually Texas who's suing the feds, because back in October, you had the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, file suit against the federal government because the feds kept destroying the border barrier. There's concertina wire, and they would tell the Border Patrol, cut through it, let people invade. So they did. They kept cutting it open. And so Texas sued, which brought us to yesterday's decision by the court to allow that to continue, the destruction of these border barriers. So in this particular case, it's Texas suing the feds.
But keep going.
Well, you won in court, so now what? The Border Patrol Union president is saying the Supreme Court's decision is going to undoubtedly encourage more illegal immigration. Do you guys know better than the Border Patrol Union?
The Border Patrol needed access, and that's why we sued to get rid of that razor wire so that they could do their jobs. And you know what?
Do their jobs. What a scam. What a complete and utter scam. Do their jobs of enabling criminality.
It also helped them do their jobs, Peter. More Border Patrol agents. There's an idea. And if you go back to the supplemental request that we put in, there's money in there for some 1,300 additional Border Patrol agents.
You know, one of the many pathetic things about the audio you just heard is that Kirby is smart enough to know what he's saying. And he knows he's lying to you. It's disgraceful, actually. The Border Patrol agents, so they can do their jobs, please lay out in detail what their jobs are. What is the job of a Border Patrol agent, John Kirby? Admiral Kirby, what is the job of a Border Patrol agent? What are they supposed to be doing? What are they doing? If we were to say, if Congress were, as they're now negotiating and debating, to give a ton more money to hiring more Border Patrol agents, what would they do? What would all those extra people do? If you could actually recruit people to do a job which has cratering morale, what would those people do? They'd be a welcome wagon. It wouldn't be a Border Patrol. They'd be rolling out the red carpet and handing out goodie bags and directing people to their transportation as the Biden administration human traffics people into the United States. Do you know how much money that we're spending on that? On human trafficking right now? The Biden administration is spending approximately $10 billion a year right now of your money. $10 billion a year through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is a segment of the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. How disgraceful all of this is. Approximately $10 billion a year to traffic millions of people into the United States through a constellation of nonprofit organizations that they give the money to. They dump them in the buses. They bring them to their city of choice all across our country. And what the Biden administration wants right now is not to secure our border. It's to enhance the invasion, to make it a more efficient invasion. And to, of course, by extension, wreck the country, because there is no other conclusion to this. Kamala Harris was on CNN last night, and she was asked about all of this. Our broken immigration system, the one that she's done nothing to fix. And she says what we really need is amnesty. This is it's like, again, disgraceful. Kamala Harris. What we really need is to forgive all sorts of millions of foreign nationals who are breaking our laws. If you're an American citizen who went into the United States Capitol building on January 6th of 2021, you will have the entire weight of the federal government come down upon you. You will be crushed for that, and your family is going to live in sadness. But if you're an illegal immigrant, if you decide to pour into our country from across our southern border, our northern border, or in a visa overstay or any other capacity, you'll be welcomed with open arms. In fact, we'll put you on the pathway to citizenship here in the United States of America. Here's Kamala Harris last night with the latest betrayal.
An unsustainable border, what they're calling a crisis. Why can't this be accomplished during this administration?
Well, so there is no question that our immigration system is broken. And so much so that we, as the first bill that we offered after our inauguration, was to fix the immigration system, which included what we must do to create a pathway for citizenship and to put the resources that are needed into the border. But sadly, people on the other side of the aisle
Pathway to
have been
citizenship.
playing
I just want to be
politics.
really clear about what that means. Pathway to citizenship. Does it get, I don't know, maybe it doesn't get any clearer than that. That's amnesty. You are forgiven for breaking our nation's laws. Congratulations. You're on your way to becoming a citizen and a voter.
A pathway for citizenship and to put the resources that are needed into the border. But sadly,
To make
people
more
on the other side
citizens.
of the aisle have been playing politics with this issue. The solutions are at hand. And, gone are the days, sadly, where a President Bush
People are arsonists.
or John McCain understood that we should have a bipartisan approach to fixing this problem, which is a long-standing
amnesty advocates. She's naming just people who support amnesty here in the United States, people who want to forgive criminality.
problem. But what are those solutions? The solution includes putting resources at the border.
Resources, that's money, that's accelerating more foreign nationals in, and
to do what we can to process people effectively, and putting in place laws that actually allow for a meaningful pathway to citizenship.
A meaningful pathway to citizenship. That's what she wants. Something that's very meaningful. More in a moment. We've got Ken Cuccinelli just moments away as well. We'll talk to him about this. It's 3. Okay, I don't know if you knew this. I certainly didn't. I was just alerted to this. Did you know that Governor Greg Abbott is not even in the United States right now? You know where he is? He's in India. He's in Mumbai. There's a statement on his website. Governor Abbott strengthens economic relationships with technology partners in Mumbai. What the hell are you doing in India? An economic development tour right now? Don't you have a collapsing southern border you should be attending to? Look, I like the standoff between Texas and the feds here, and I hope Texas prevails in the end. They've got the deck stacked against them. But the last thing they need is an absentee governor. Get your ass back to the plane. Roll yourself back to Texas. Get out there and protect your people. Seriously, what's going on? He's got held meetings today. This is a press release from yesterday. Greg Abbott today held meetings with economic development partners and business leaders in Mumbai, India, discussing issues and industries critical to Texas and India, including the future of technology. Wow. So forget my chatter about what's going to happen next, how Texas is going to square off against the feds. We might have to wait for Greg Abbott to get back so he can hear the ideas. I don't know when he's returning. But if he cares about Texas and the United States, he should do it very quickly. That's wild. I mean, I think the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, I think he's still in the state. Ken Paxton is still working. Texas police are definitely doing the job right now. The National Guard are absolutely working there. The Border Patrol praying for a solution here, rooting on Texas to the extent that it's doing the work. It's time for the governor to return to America. We've got problems for him to deal with here. Coming up, Ken Cuccinelli will be joining us just minutes away. Good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, we speak to the mother of a victim of the Biden illegal immigration policies. Tammy Nobles joins us. Her daughter, Kayla Hamilton, was killed by an illegal immigrant right here in the United States. It's a rough story. We'll talk to Tammy about that coming up. She just testified before Congress. Democrats treated her horribly. Michael Ding is with us at 5 o'clock from America First Legal. We talk about their new lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security. And from the Federalist, John Daniel Davidson is here at 5:30 as we discuss Nikki Haley's doomed campaign. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A massive decision yesterday by the United States Supreme Court to aid and abet the invasion of the United States of America. I'd like to get a reaction to this from somebody who knows a lot more about the law than I do. Joining us now is Ken Cuccinelli. He's a senior fellow for Homeland Security and Immigration at the Center for Renewing America and a former deputy secretary of Homeland Security under President Trump. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Now,
someday
Ken,
we're going to talk about a win.
I hope we do. I really do. I saw this yesterday, and as I've been noting, there was no opinion attached to this decision by the court, but I did see that the people who dissented, and among them were Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh. And I realized instantly what side of the argument I'm on. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, it ain't over. The fact that there was no opinion kind of tells you that. They sort of, I read this as erring on the side of federal supremacy for the duration of the case. They said, okay, federal government, what this is about is cutting razor wire. You can do that until as the case goes on. Because all of this, remember, Vince, is preliminary. They haven't reached the merits of the case. In fact, today, the Center for Renewing America, where I'm a senior fellow working on immigration issues, we filed an amicus brief in the Fifth Circuit, which is considering the underlying case on an expedited basis. They're going to have oral argument in February. So we get another shot at this. It is the wrong decision, in my view, by the Supreme Court, but it isn't a final decision.
Right.
And we believe that this should simply be decided that giving Texas the power to police their own border. And if the federal government wants to also police our border finally after 3 years, they're welcome to join them. But interfering with it is not something that is appropriate.
But the federal government
that's how it'll end up.
The federal government is destroying Texas state property in the service of doing something that I think, by my reading, maybe I'm wrong, is unconstitutional. Because the federal government has a constitutional obligation to protect Texas against invasion, not aid and abet one. In fact, you and I have talked about that very issue.
Yes, no, you're correct. That is, of course, not how the federal government casts what they are doing, even though they are destroying property by cutting the wire, but they give a different purpose that seems more in line with their constitutional responsibilities, is while states, under the very end of Article 1, Section 10, have the power to defend themselves from invasion with nobody's permission, including the federal government. The federal government also, under Article 4, Section 4, has the responsibility of defending all the states against invasion. Now, we all know they're not doing that. That's part of the reason the founders left the states with this authority, so that when the federal government either wasn't around or chose not to do its job, the states would have the authority to protect themselves. It's just self-defense. That's all it is. And I believe the Fifth Circuit will find that Texas does have that authority, and that it'll go back up to the Supreme Court, and at least Amy Coney Barrett, if not Chief Justice Roberts as well, will ultimately join the merits opinion when it's fully briefed and when the full case is before them.
So I hope you're right about that, but I'm concerned about that outcome because, like, normally, if as you go through a court process like this, you had an injunction issued by the Fifth Circuit against the federal government from breaking these border barriers. And yesterday, the Supreme Court vacated that injunction and said, no, you can keep breaking the barriers. Doesn't that kind of indicate that they think that Texas is going to lose on the merits, or at least that it's a jump ball right now? Because my impression is that normally a court would keep in place an injunction where they think that that side would likely succeed on the merits, right?
So remember that at the preliminary stage, you have heightened burdens. So that's why I don't view this as predicting the final outcome with any certainty. I take some heart in the fact that there are 4 justices who, even with the heightened burden brought on by preliminary injunction structure and process and requirements,
right,
are already there. So on the full merits hearing, there isn't as high a burden for Texas to prove to exercise its own constitutional protections.
Okay.
And so I think there's a real chance of getting more justices once that process plays itself out.
Yes.
And I also mentioned, I would point out, they didn't issue an opinion. I don't really feel like there's a strong feeling on the part of the 5 that allowed the Border Patrol to continue to cut through Texas property. And I would note, this doesn't stop Texas from returning people to Mexico, from having their DPS, Department of Public Safety, block people from entering Texas from Mexico. It doesn't address any of those things, which Texaco is attempting to do now.
It doesn't.
Texas, not Texaco.
Texaco. Texas, different thing. But my impression is that Texas is still able to put up as much barbed wire, concertina wire as they want. It's just the court said it is okay for the feds to destroy it if they like.
That's right, and that may be odd. It is. I think that is a result of the natural tendency of the Supreme Court to expect federal supremacy. And the problem with that here is, and your listeners, many of them are in their cars, when they get home, look at Article 1, the very last paragraph. states have war powers without congressional permission when they're actually invaded. Now, that doesn't mean they should use tanks and planes, and Texas isn't doing that. They're just using barbed wire and people. That's it. But that is their exercise of their war powers to repel the invasion that is happening at our southern border.
Right.
Greg Abbott is the commander-in-chief of Texas, and he has the authority to do that under the U.S. Constitution.
By the way, he should be at home in Texas, right, and not in India right now. That seems like a bad place to be, given.
Nice, yes, under the circumstances.
I think so. I mean, he's an obligation to the people of his state. He should be there with them.
Still has the authority. The most important thing, though, let's not kid ourselves, is that he exercised his legal authority to defend the border. And I've advocated for him to defend it much more vigorously than he has. They haven't, for example, been returning people to Mexico. They can do that using the prisoner of war authority under the war power of the Constitution that Texas has to repel this invasion. They should be more robust in doing that. I don't mean using higher forms of force. I mean using more legal tools. So
where should Texas take this next when it comes to the federal government? Should they just keep laying out concertina wire and challenging the Biden administration to demonstrate its callous disregard for our borders? Should they? I said at the outset, maybe they should sort of test all of the constitutional questions here and actually put a Border Patrol agent under arrest for destroying state property and see where it goes from there. What do you think Texas should do now?
Yeah, I think they should exercise every option. I hate to see that last one because I would say that a Border Patrol agent with a Supreme Court ruling, if what they're arrested for is cutting the wire when the Supreme Court has allowed that, their qualified immunity would leave them walking on day one. So I don't think that's your test case. I do agree with you that every other aspect of this should be taken. And look, part of the reason we filed the amicus brief today is we are dissatisfied with the vigor with which Texas is arguing its constitutional authority to defend its own border. Greg Abbott has had to have been dragged kicking and screaming to using this authority that has been so obvious and in front of him all along. And frankly, Texas used this for decades and decades and decades to defend the border, and no one ever said boo. No one complained. The Texas Rangers would go into Mexico to protect the Texas border, which they have the authority to do when the state is being invaded. And that doesn't mean a foreign army. We're being invaded by people from outside this country, and that's all it takes to trigger that authority.
I will say one thing that Texas should definitely do is capture on camera every time the Border Patrol is compelled by DHS to break open these barriers. Because the American people deserve to see who's actually opening the border up to an invasion. It is the Biden administration explicitly.
So today, Peter Doocy was asking John Kirby, a spokesman for the administration, so you say you're doing everything you can to secure the border, but you're cutting Texas's barbed wire to open the border. What say you? And, it's nothing but there's no question, as you said earlier, Vince, that what the administration here is doing is not in pursuit of securing the border. It is in pursuit of opening the border. Plain and simple. There's no two ways about it. So there's no other reason to do it.
There were statements released by Texas yesterday, and you've kind of already made the point that you think Texas can be more vigorous in defending our borders and specifically their state's border. I saw Ken Paxton put out a statement yesterday, the Attorney General, saying that this fight is not over, and I look forward to defending our state's sovereignty. Additionally, Greg Abbott's office did release a statement. He said this is not over. Texas's razor wire is an effective deterrent to the illegal crossings Biden encourages. I will continue to defend Texas's constitutional authority to secure the border and prevent the Biden administration from destroying our property. What are these? Go ahead. I think you're answering the question I was about to ask. What do you make of these statements?
Yeah, they sound tough. Operation Lone Star was put in place in March of 2021. And what did they do? They stood tough-looking guys on the border. And what did they do? They watched people walk right by them, and they didn't do a single thing to impede them. They never name it Operation, we're going to stand there and for these tough, cool Texas sounding names, Operation Lone Star. Come on. We don't care about the name. We care about actually defending the border. It has taken Greg Abbott over 2 years. It took the end of Title 42 for him to even start attempting to defend the border in any meaningful way. One thing that could happen in Washington as we're having a money debate in the Capitol is they could give Texas the dollars that they might otherwise give to DHS if Texas is actually going to defend the border, given that DHS is actively working to open the border under Joe Biden.
It's. Do you think Greg Abbott should keep busing illegals across our country, or are we well past that being a good idea?
No, I think he should, and this is an area where I can say that I was wrong early on. I objected to this.
Me too.
Because it is human trafficking. And my position was I oppose Joe Biden doing it, so I need to oppose everybody else doing it. But the reality is it has opened the eyes of Democrats in some of the bluest parts of this country, Democrat cities, and I don't have to rattle them off to you. You've talked about them many times,
right,
that are screaming bloody murder. Of course, they blame Republicans, and they come up with every excuse they possibly can think of not to blame Joe Biden. But America gets it. America understands.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'd like to see, you mentioned some pictures. I think we should show more pictures of the New York shelters that they build for these folks, the schools they kick school kids out of to house illegal aliens.
Well, the Biden administration has been, and many of these Democrat mayors, they are preventing cameras from even seeing what's going on behind the curtains.
Can you imagine if I had done that as the deputy secretary at DHS, if we didn't let people into Border Patrol facilities, AOC's outside crying, that bull crap that she pulled.
Yeah.
We can see from the Biden time, she never meant it. Neither did anyone on her team. It's all pure political theater. And the whole open borders thing, when you combine it with election bills like H.R. 1, where they're trying to dump non-citizens on the voter rolls by the millions, this is part of a bigger strategy for the radical left. And Joe Biden is a willing tool of it.
Big time. Okay, Ken, lastly, before I let you go, I do want to ask you one political question. It's New Hampshire primary day.
Sure.
But you created a PAC to support Ron DeSantis' candidacy, Never Back Down.
Yeah.
And, of course, DeSantis' campaign has come to a conclusion. Do you have any plans for the PAC? Will we see it retooled in a way, either to help the Trump candidacy, or is there some other purpose for the PAC now?
No, that was the purpose the PAC was formed to achieve, and we're going to have a long wind down. That's the nature of the beast with these things. We still have to deal with all of our compliance complaints people file based on newspaper articles. We still have to deal with them, even though they're frivolous. So we have a lot of wind down work to do. But the purpose of that PAC was to support Ron DeSantis' run for president. I hope he runs again in the future. I think he is the best conservative chief executive that anyone alive and listening to you and me right now has ever seen on issue after issue. And I think that kind of leadership would be spectacular for America. That's why I supported him in his race for the presidency. He didn't see a path forward. I agree with him that Donald Trump has really not got the votes yet, but he's locked up enough of the hearts and minds of the Republican electorate for states that are going to vote early enough that by the end of Super Tuesday, mathematically, this will be over. And I don't see any path to diverting that. Nikki Haley never had a path to the nomination. She cannot appeal to people who prefer an updated Republican vision that's focused on the American worker and regular folks instead of corporate elites. She's still stuck in the early 2000s. I kept thinking of the Romney Obama. The early 2000s have called asking for their Republican, and Nikki is here to serve that up. So
she is.
That's how that'll play out. Obviously, you can just compare the time setting COVID aside for both presidents, because they both did badly at COVID, Trump and Biden. But if you set that aside, where they both did badly, America did a whole lot better under Trump than it's done under Biden, and I think that's basically going to be the whole campaign.
Big time.
But I do also think there may be the most significant third-party effort you've ever seen because of the polling that shows that a majority of voters would prefer not to see this rematch.
Well, we'll
So,
see. We'll
I don't
see.
know if
But
that'll play out.
but I
it's
think
gonna be an interesting year.
I agree with you on Ron DeSantis. He's a great American, and I'm so glad he's on our side. And he still has a great future ahead for sure. Thank you very much, Ken Cuccinelli. Good to talk to you as always, sir.
Good to be with you as always.
All right. Kamala Harris's big interview on CNN. They were so excited to have Kamala Harris last night. The reporter started practically crying at how historic that conversation was. The first person to ever be impressed by Kamala Harris. History being made. We'll share that with you coming up. Also, Tammy Nobles is with us. She's the mother of a young lady who was killed by an illegal immigrant right here in the United States. And she was not treated well by Democrats in Congress. We'll get her reaction to the way she's been treated lately and her thoughts on all of the news this week.